So I'm going to create a new project. So let it be a new project. Yesterday we were writing a table design, I hope. So we'll just recreate the example using JQuery. I'll try to see if I can add a small CSS along with that, but I want you to create some sort of a nicely crafted design. Due to time limit, I may be creating a very simple one. And also notice my files being kept in this folder. It may be different for you. If you want to choose a different files folder structures, create your required file. Folders in a required. According to your preference, if you want to keep it somewhere, put it into the respective directory. So I don't want a template kind of thing. Just I'm going to hit finish. I get the jQuery from one of my previous project. Just copy it here. So better I close other two projects to avoid confusion. Before starting, your NetBeans in the left hand side, you're seeing three tabs. These kind of views are called perspective, files and folder structure. I would recommend to stay in the project's perspective as much as possible, not to get into other perspective, which it's not something different, but it is a different look and feel of the folder structure. NetBeans creates some sort of folders by default and keep everything organized. So if at all you are using this tab, make sure put your file inside the public underscore HTML, not to put in the other files folders, which is used for testing and configuration purpose. Better we stay in this project perspective as much as possible, and it will be easy for us to maintain everything inside the folder site root. And service, if you have a external requirement such as server, database engine, everything, there is a built-in supports are there, but our scope of the training program is not to talk about these things. So I'm going to stay as much as possible in the project perspective, and this is how I'll be creating all the HTML file. So index HTML by default is created by NetBeans. So let me do a little cleanup. So first job is to integrate they call JQuery. I'll try to follow whatever keyword shortcuts are available or whatever the NetBeans is recommending to me. This is called relative path. I already explained to you. So trying to giving a relative path will make sure the same project or the same application could be installed in a different server environment without doing much configuration. So JS, it's a folder, and immediately there is a file exists called jQuery. NetBeans will discover it if you hit control space. I would recommend using this strategy because it will try to help you where the file is located, so you can easily identify the relative path. Not try to type it. Of course, if you try to type it, make sure you write without any errors or spelling mistake or something like that. But otherwise, go through the suggestion tool, whatever your NetBeans is providing for you. Okay, so we would need a form. I just keep a div because I may give some sort of style sheet, aligning and all the stuff. So I'm just going to keep a empty div. So let me create a label. Placeholder. If you want to give a name also give, but may not be required to start. I mean, for this example, it's a good practice to define the label is used for which purpose or which DOM. In this case, I already told you HTML5 has a lot of semantic elements which will guide the search engine bots or browser. For example, if you are running the example in the phone, so that being a helpful tags, the phone could easily bring the code or maybe native built-in keyboard into a specific format. So the label is used for name which guides this particular element. Okay, there is a followed by there is an input element exist. So it may be helpful for any other devices which is depending on the script as for guidelines. So let me create a couple of things. If you notice, I tried to avoid giving a name because I felt there may be some sort of conflict because there is an attribute exists called name. So that's the reason I just prefixed. So if you have a little suspicion, may try to give a kind of a name which is not a absolute keyword. And this is true for almost all the development language. Not to use the existing keywords or already existing keywords. Try to slightly modify the word, but still give the meaning for the element. For in this case, it's going to be for a name. I just made it as a first name kind of thing, F name or like that. Sub and other stuff may not be a keyword, so I just conveniently use them. Okay, and finally, I'm going to need a button. Okay, everything into a single. Okay, I think into mark single line. Because of the obvious reason, they are not boxes. If at all a div, uh, it's a box, it would have occupied the entire line, but being these two input elements may not be a box-based design. Let's try to see if we could make some sort of arrangement. Before that, let me add some sort of style sheet to give a different color backgrounds so that I'm just going to keep the style sheet inside this document itself. But if you really want to keep it as external file, it's up to your choice. So we have a usual strategy keeping a container box. So that box will keep everything either center or wherever it is, and then child elements we usually keep. So this is the easiest strategy to bring everything to a center. Since it is having dot, it is a class selector. Okay, things are into center somehow. Let us break them into this may not be required, but I have some other purpose to keep this div. I just formatted the code so that the spacing, intent spacing could be given properly. So if you want it formatted, make sure you go to source format. So it will put all the required intent spacing so everything looks like a nested tag. So it is like, once we are done, let me see how it is looking like. Okay, so now everything into one single line, but still not looking perfect. So now time to give a spacing. I'm just going to make them as a form box. Let's give some sort of margin. Okay, some are fine. This label, better to have a fixed width so that everything will be pulled into the right spot. I don't want to give a, let me make a width. Block will make it, okay, that's also fine, not bad. Remember, sometime if your style sheets does not obey the width and height, reason may be that particular element may not be a block, because the divs are built-in blocks, so which we were doing all the box-based design by default. Sometimes certain elements may not be by default a block. So forcing it to become a block will make sure your other width and height criterions obeyed. The problem being a block, the block tend to occupy the available space. If there is no other block which could take the rest of the space, because the input may not be a block, so that's just trying to occupy the entire space. Or there may be other fix I could do instead of label. Let me give it for, let it be. This looks up looking good. Let me give some width for input. This is much easier solution. I just made it to 100% whatever your DOM, or in this case div, allows you to simply occupy. Better we give some sort of background color for this container. I didn't give explicit height, that's why it is smaller. So I may go ahead and give a minimum height. So some 800px. Okay, some are fine. Padding top is more than enough, I hope. Okay, things okay, fine. So in this case, I'm just going to enter the user name, subject, mark, and bottom I would like to display a table. So let us create a table now. So creating table, I already gave a guidelines. Table has a two block, one being header, another being the active body. The headers are going to be a fixed or single row, and the table body may contain more than one row depending on the data. So let me create a table head first, and it has a single row and followed by, all the table cells. So serial number, that's we are going to create. We're done with the head and the table body. Table body dynamically, the rows are going to be dynamically added. So we will think about how to add them later. But it's a very generic table, so you won't be seeing any designs attached. If you notice, it's just you get a single line. It's not something so good because we haven't added any width or height criterion or padding or margin criterion to this one. If required, of course, since I have a single table, I really don't want to add any class selector. Better I directly strategy to bring the any DOM into center is adding a margin 0 auto. So depending on the parent, it will try to bring it to a center. What it really does, the left and right is been set to auto margin. So whatever space available from the both the direction, it will try to push it. So from left direction it is pushing and right direction it is pushing in the same impulse, or directly the DOM is coming into the center. Whereas top bottom I did not give any value because I just kept 0. So this first one goes for top bottom and this left and right. So the convention which we already discussed. So we have a table now. Let's give a TR, how it is going to come. So the table data or the subsequent rows going to get added to a table body. We are going to dynamically add using our JQuery. So if you really want to see how it looks like, you may go ahead and add some sort of table row and see how things looks like. So for table data, notice that is a different color. I didn't give any border, but there is a small padding or spacing available, so that is more than enough. If at all required any border, you can give. Border color also can be given. So let me give the border. Okay, colors, I'll just keep the same border, so I don't want to spend time on designing. Concern is to see the jQuery how things move on. This is enough. So we tested how these things are coming, so I'm just going to remove them. Let me proceed with adding a script block. I'm adding the script block immediately after the jQuery, external file, added to the document. So immediately I'm calling the script block. So it is best practice to check the document is ready or all DOMs being loaded. So it requires a function callback. So in this case, the document all DOM is loaded. Time to attach the event listeners. In this case, the button is going to be the event or trigger, which is going to take the data, whatever been written on input fields, and then go ahead and proceed to add that into the existing table. So the convention starts with $symbol. ID selector being, I already have a button having an ID save, having a click event registration, and put a function callback. So whenever the button gets clicked, it is going to listen the button event, in this case the click event, and give a callback here as soon as the button gets clicked. Let's create a couple of variables. This one we'll be using quite often. I already told you wherever we use input fields. So the selector, dollar selector and val, we can get whatever values being typed, and of course I'm going to capture them into one variable. Okay. What else we need to do? Okay, create one more variable. So something. So time to write a bit of HTML code. First one is being tr. Let me nest everything. Sorry, the suggestion won't work. This may be quite redundant because typing an HTML code as a string is not a good practice, though. Yes, we have some other alternative. We can create it into a separate HTML file. We can bring it over here. JQuery has that option. But for time being, to make it simple, I'm just going to use this strategy. And inside, almost 4 TD or table data is going to be placed. So just make sure everything is fine. A table row, cells or table data. So each pair, I mean, there I have 4 pairs of table data. For in this case, 1, 2, 3, 4. Everything is there. Time to concatenate. Serial number. Okay, let me add it a little later. I'll come back to that. Easy stuff. So if you really want to have a control over it, what I can do, this guy adds unnecessary new line which is not needed even though. Okay, time to attach them to a table body. Table body I haven't given ID. Let me try with a different selector this time. I haven't given a hash because it is not ID selector. It's an element, the tag selector itself. The jQuery supports all kind of selectors. So I just put the T body because there is one single table exists, and unless if I have multiple tables, that giving a ID makes sense. In this case, may not be required. Append table row. As soon as we are done with that, we have to make sure all values set to empty. Okay, so looks fine. Time to test. So we have a data inserted to a table, and of course these fields being emptied. We have to find some sort of mechanism to increment the value. We'll come back to that. So the value is being added without refreshing the page. DOM is manipulated, the cells being added successfully, and everything looks fine. So a simple table based design with a little style sheet and every alignment being done. Now on the top of it we have to do a couple of things. We have to give an option to edit. One, and we need to save that is also a very important task. So without saving them, it's doesn't make any sense. So we have to save them and try to see if I can retrieve, and I mean, as soon as I open the document, for example, if I refresh, everything gone. But if we could find a mechanism to save somewhere, even though if I refresh or close and reopen, I should be getting back my data, whatever I entered. So that part I have to make. But before that, we have to make a provision to add, edit, and other features. So that also we have to proceed. Before that, I'll just write a simple way whether my data is getting saved or not. I want to check. So is there any way we could do it? We'll have to identify. Okay. Here I'll do one thing. If you see that local storage is a global object. L being a lowercase and S being uppercase, camel casing is there. It's a global object. You can define any name. So and start saving. So whatever value you give, it will be saved. How? Local storage being an object, you can define any inner object inside and you can assign the value. It will be immediately saved, and you can anytime retrieve it back and see how it is, or you can use it for your further manipulation. So let's see whether it is saved or not. According to our design, whenever the save button is clicked, the local storage object will be created and saved. How do I identify? Going to inspect element. Okay, let me bring it back. Bottom. Console, profile, resources. Going to the resource tab, there is a local storage option available. If you select it, if you see that one of the entry got added, TBL data having a value. These are all the some sort of built-in values which something got added. But if you notice, one additional local storage element or object got added called TBL data, nothing but the one I just created over here, and I just assigned a value. So the value you could very well identify here. So it is permanently being saved. And there is one more storage called session storage, if you notice that. The session storage, similar to local storage, but the session storage value persisted as long as the browser window is active. Once you close the browser window, session storage would get deleted. And that makes sense. For example, you want to maintain active login session only when the browser windows are open. When the user just close the browser, you want to get rid of the login credentials, you can make use of the session storage. But the local storage will not be deleted, but whereas the session storage will be deleted when the browser window gets closed. So slightly least life cycle one, probably I can say. There are a couple of other storage engines are also listed. IndexDB, of course, we are going to talk about it. The WebSQL, I may not be talking about because the WebSQL is not widely supported across all the browsers. So IndexDB, so those are all the storage engines we'll be seeing it going ahead. So it is adding those details. So one more problem with the local storage, mostly I can add a primitive data. Primitive data mean the string values, string integers, booleans, those things only I can keep it inside the session storage, so session or local storage. I cannot keep a composite data like JavaScript array or anything else. So because in this case it looks like a number of data is going to come, so it will be better to save an array instead of a single items. So we have to make the local storage somehow save the JavaScript array so that we can retrieve and display, or probably we can save them. I'll do one thing. I hope you remember I was talking about JavaScript data types. For example, we break. Okay, 1 second. So I hope you remember JavaScript objects. We usually have a curly brace, and sorry, we give a square bracket. So these two different data types exist. Uh, so the first one being a JavaScript object, the second one being an array. And I remember I talked about it. Of course, you can create your own custom data type. Of course, making a combination of object and array, and you can denote them into a single object. In this case, the entire table data, I would like to denote it as a single object. It's a combination of JavaScript object and an array element. So we will create that, and then we'll try to save that into a local storage and try to retrieve them so that we can display back into the table. So that's the task. In fact, the design what we have completed does the DOM manipulation as expected, but the next subsequent requirement is to persist the data. The local storage is a global object, so any subsequent object can be augmented with that, so we can simply save it, which I already explained by simply creating an object onto the global object called local storage and assign the value. It's just saved. And it only accepts the primitive data, and also it doesn't have a indexing capability that we already know about it, but we'll see for this example if we could make something so that composite data such as array could be saved in the local storage. Being a primitive type, it only accepts string, booleans or number type. So even though we have a JavaScript object, because the data what we are going to enter in this is creating a kind of composite data, like different number of students and each records, or for example subject and mark. So it looks like an array. Of course, it will be better to treat the entire object as an array, but the limitation of the local storage, it has to be converted into string in order to be saved. So how we are going to do this, or how we are going to handle this situation? There is a way to convert a JavaScript array or object into string, and of course that is widely popular. That's what we call JSON or JSON, whatever. It's a noun being, I could call it in any way. So JavaScript object notation, which is quite popular, and it's widely used in popular web services as well. So a JavaScript object notation, the word JavaScript object notation. So it is a way to denote a JavaScript object into a string format. Just a denotion. That's the reason we call that as a JSON. So I'm going to create a JavaScript array, of course, because each data which is going to be added to a JavaScript array, that is obvious. But at the end of the sequence where I am going to save it into a local storage, I'll convert the JavaScript array into a JSON format. Then save it into a local storage. Of course, JSON format is nothing but a plain string. So that I am going to save it into a local storage. Of course, local storage can save the array, string. And also reverse. I'm just going to reconvert the JSON string into a JavaScript object back. So again, I'll reuse it and display them into a table. So this example not only going to talk about the local storage and it's the way to be saved. We are also going to introduce a JSON which is going to be used across, because even in iOS when we handle a web service request or request and response, we'll be using the JSON. So it's the right time to see them. But before that, I hope you already know about the JavaScript object and array. But anyway, I'll write it one more time. A JavaScript object, usually we denote using this curly brace. It's an empty object in this case. And it's an array. Array means a composite, the repeated values. So it could be initialized or denoted within the square box or uh, this particular design what we are going to create, uh, it's a combination, like it's going to be a JavaScript array, but each instance of an array it's a JavaScript object. So that's, let's see how we could create it. And also I'm going to use a multiple way of creating JavaScript function. uh, the one you already know, a function could be denoted as an object type, so which can also be used as an argument, which you already saw. So before that, let me first create an object from, maybe it is the right place to do, because after updating to the UI we can proceed creating an object. So some table record, it's an array, empty array. Okay, just initialization. What are all the parameters? F name, could be anything, but F name something I've been using here, so it's nothing but sorry, suggestion won't come because that's custom object what you are creating. What else? Mark. This way also an object can be created. One. This is idea one. Create an empty object and define its attribute and assign the values. This is one way, because the F name is nothing but this one, whatever the user enters. An object can be created. Finally, it could be pushed or added. Push mean it will add a object at the end of the existing array. By default, the array is empty now. So let me create it in this way. So in this case, the table record is going to have an object inserted, and it's going to have in this way. But let's see how it is looking like. I'm not going to save it, but though I want to see how it is looking like. So console log helps us to see them. So let's see. We'll add one single entry, then see in the console if you could see something else. You see that one array element created, and it is having one single object, 0, 0 being index, and oh sorry, that a bunch of objects being created seems to be push, 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 push. Am I putting into a wrong place? I still don't see the object. It's okay. Let me slightly modify the code. Let me first see what is the TBL object, then we'll push it. Whether the object is successfully created, we have a little suspicion over here. Okay, the object is fine. So, pardon? Yeah, that I disabled it because it did not push it. You mean to say this way? Did I have in a different way before? Oh, both were TBL record. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's the reason I was just wondering why that composite array is being created. Okay, so an object created, that object is getting added to the array. Let's verify that. Sorry, still I'm displaying. Okay, so a square bracket denotes it's an array, and opening that array, I have a single object. So if you notice that fname are sub. So subsequent additions. Let me empty one more time. I'll add one more value. Of course, it is going to override. So the problem is we should have made it as a global. So because it's everything there inside the function. So what we can do, we will make this one the array as a global. Making a global array, make sure you just initialize it just outside of the scope. Mean a global object is going to be common for all the function in this case. So I made it. The particular TVL record is initialized, and it is a global object. So in that global object, everything is going to be pushed. That particular object may be a local one, but the instance of the array will be having an iteration. So I have a array being populated as it grows, so with the multiple values. So we have a global array in each instance of an array, which is actually populating the result, objects, so keep inserting them, and we have an array. Now we are trying to save that into a local storage. So local storage being a global object, I can introduce any attribute or whatever. So in this case, tvl data, something like that, whatever name you feel comfortable. There is one more global object or class available, JSON, all uppercase. Stringify. Stringify mean any JavaScript object or array can be converted into a JSON string in one single line. Just one single line, everything will get converted into a string. So I'm just convert my JavaScript array into a JSON format and save it into my local storage. So let me save it and refresh, and let me go back to, where is that, network resources. Yeah, so I already have a record. I'm just going to either delete it to make sure everything is empty to start with, so nothing. So, now if you notice, our new entry got added. It has a square bracket to start with and inside an object, denoted in a string format. See, being updated, separated by comma, a new value got added. We see that these values been added and created. If you refresh also, these things won't go away. Or if you close and reopen it, so let me copy. I'm just going to close this window. It will be still there in the resource tab. It's still there. So we have to find a mechanism to retrieve it again and again make a table view populated, so that we will make sure it is retained throughout. So let us slightly reorganize the code. Before that, if you feel this way is redundant, I'll also write an alternate way. Instead of that, you can make This way also you can, in single line, you can create the object. First one is key, another one is value. So it is equivalent to the same one. What I did in the first way is, first I created an empty object, then assigned the attribute, and then assigned the values. I did one by one, but in this case I did just in a single line itself. Both the same. So whatever way you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and do it. Okay, so this is one way. Let us, so we are saving into our sessions, local storage, everything is fine, and we have to find a way to bring it back. Let me add a couple of utility functions so that I'll move the logic into a discrete elements instead of having everything written inside the save click button. What I'm going to do, there are various ways to write a function. We already know writing a function in this way. Uh, function, name of the function, argument what it takes. It's an easy way of writing a function. So if I have to call this function, so what I'm going to do before, I'm going to call function table row. Okay, let me get back the JSON data. What I really did now, it's a reverse process. I query the local storage, get the key saying the table data, I'll be getting a string. And I'm converting that string back to a normal JavaScript object. So in this case, you have to use parse. This process converts the JavaScript object to string. This process does the same in a reverse order. It converts the string back to a JavaScript object. So to be precise, JSON string I'll write. In this case, what we did, convert JS object, JSON string. So two different ones. When I parse it, I'll get back the table record array. Or if you have a little confusion over here, you can make it as a local object. Remember, even though it has the same name, but I declared it into a local, so it will be a local object. So if you don't want to override this, no problem, but I really don't see any use of having a local object, because whatever you get back after converting, you're going to get back the same array. Now you can iterate it over and get back all objects. Easiest for loop would be, we all know, easiest one. So I iterate over. It's a pretty outdated for loop, but still good. But we'll see some other for loops also in the subsequent example, but this is the easiest one. Just iterate over the array and get back all the objects. So I'm going to recreate the table from the local storage, and I'm just going to put it, so just let me move this line, Control C to here. But instead of this one, each occurrence and pass the object name. Make sure it is the same. So I get back all the objects, re-prepare the table row, and time to attach that into where I am doing it. Table row. Where is the append is happening? Oh, here it is. So it's going to be appended from the local storage. Okay, looks fine. Let us remove the redundant code, repeated code. Here I don't see any use because we have already declared row there, and the append part also not needed. So rest of the part, let's code let it be. So what this particular design does, it gets whatever the value typed in the input field, prepare a JavaScript array, immediately save it into a local storage. After that, create the table. Just call that function wherever applicable. So the job is to first populate the arrays from a local storage, then prepare your view. So that makes sense. So I just moved the substantial amount of logic to a different function, and every time when a new record is added, it will create a JavaScript object, and then it will add that particular object to a existing or global JavaScript array. And not only to that, it will also convert that into a JSON and save it into a local storage. After that, it will go ahead and prepare the view. So in this case, it is a separate function. It will requery and get back and does the work. So I can safely do a couple of things over here. Since it is written as a separate function, I can call it multiple places wherever I need. So I can do it as soon as the document ready function, every DOM is loaded immediately, because chances are there the local storage already have some sort of data. So not to wait until the save button is pressed, I simply call the create table row, query the data from a local storage, and prepare the table. And every time whenever the button gets clicked, it will just refresh the local storage with the new data and recreate the table. So in this case, you will have an updated table always. Of course, you notice that I just refreshed, everything is still there. This itself very clearly tells the data is there in the memory. I can very well close and reopen, and data always is going to be there. So it's permanently saved now. So no need to worry about it, just the data remains as. So let me add one more value. So something going wrong, so let's, okay. The create table row, what it really does, JSON parse length, okay, let's parse the data. Am I calling into a wrong place? Okay, yeah, I got an error. Can anybody tell me what really went wrong, why it has come in this way? Pardon? And somebody try to guess it correct. Yeah, correct. The problem is the append is being called here. So there is already a DOM populated. Along with this, it just appended the existing one. So while preparing this loop, I have to make sure the table is emptied first, then refresh. So that will be the ideal solution. So let me empty, finish it off, then recreate. So you will always have a latest value. We just have a value. So a simple logic. Even though the serial number I did not pay attention, but serial I can put it now because I have a for loop that is quite efficient. I start with 0, so we can do, now we have a serial number added. So just think about my previous student or so. So we just have table data populated, and everything is stored in the local storage, so the data is persisted. Even though if I close and reopen any time, I will have my data ready. But for that to happen, we did couple of mechanisms or couple of patterns, design pattern in such a way. The code logic is slightly separated from object handling and the view handling. If you notice that logic, the view handling moved to a separate function. So creating a view put into a separate function, and data handling kept into a separate function. So it is easy for us to maintain some sort of code separation kind of thing. You just decide, okay, which one would be used quite often, which one would be used for single time purpose. Keep it organized and you will have an idea. I could even make it much more efficient, but to start with, this design is much more fine. But later, on subsequent example, I'll introduce some other design patterns also, so that we'll get used to a new one. And probably this also, because I want to remove anything specific to design, I want to move it here. So this is only left to handle the data alone, and the view is created over here. So everything is separated. So writing a function is pretty straightforward in this way, and you have one more way to write the function also. If you want to write the same, this is also equivalent to the same syntax. You could write the function in this way also. Function name, and we did, that's one format. And defining a variable and assign the function output to it, both are same way of handling the function. So I'll be using it in a multiple way wherever so sometime I will declare a function, just name of the function and go ahead, and sometime I'll create a variable and define the function in this way. So to make sure we understand all sort of logic or all sort of way to declare a function. So you can even create a function in this way or the previous one. So I'll also comment it. So both are same. So whatever suitable for you, go ahead and use it. And when you create in this way, only one change you would be required to do, since it is a variable, you would have to add a semicolon. So otherwise, say, semicolon itself is an optional as far as JavaScript concerned. So whatever suitable way you feel, make sure you follow it. And object also, in a two different way it can be declared. That also I have kept it and commented. So I've used in this way also. And handling the JavaScript array, we have functions such as push, splice, and other way. In this example, what we have we added an element to a JavaScript array. We may have to edit or we may have to delete it. So the JavaScript array, having the indexing capability, it has all the feature. So maybe post lunch I'll write another example which talks mainly on the JavaScript array. Of course I have to talk, because with this example I'm going to add one more button over here, or probably when I click on this it becomes an editable. Let the user type and modify the value, and Subsequently, it updates the JavaScript array and also updates the local storage. So we have to extend this code a little bit. So we'll add. So of course we added that particular feature, edit and delete option to this one. So we'll probably put a cross symbol over here for deleting purpose, or clicking on the particular field becomes an editable. So those kind of thing we will add post-lunch session, maybe, if at all, if you could finish this example faster. So subsequent example is going to be on the local storage, index DB, and persisting engine. And of course, I'm going to add a little bit of designing concept also added to that, because this particular design is for desktop and it may not be suitable for smaller screen devices. We'll have to work on that as well, and we have to add a couple of other design specific concept. And since it is a student record, there is one popular example is also there, because in HTML, if I have to denote some formula, mathematical formula, how you are going to write it, so that, for example, square root or something like that. So then in HTML there is an option to write a mathematical formula as well. So we'll extend it. So we'll cover all the topics which has been assigned to us by extending certain example. And ultimately we have to make it mobile ready. That's the main concern. But before that, we'll understand various way of handling JavaScript object and doing a transaction with them. Of course, we have seen local storage now, but this particular table is still efficient, but we have to add the edit and delete option to this. If you want to add that feature, you have to know about how to handle the same, for example, edit and update to a JavaScript array. So once we understand them, we'll update the local storage. From there we can take it forward. And also I give an example of how to denote a function in a different way. So this way also you can denote it, or this way also you can denote it. It's up to you. And we also saw a simple example on a JSON, JavaScript object notation, how a JavaScript object, or object means generic name I'm talking, how a JavaScript object can be converted into a JSON string, and how a JSON string can be converted back to a JavaScript object. We have to do it only for a reason, because the local storage accept only the primitive data type, such as string, boolean, and number. That's the reason I had to do this job. Otherwise I won't need to do that. But thanks to that as well, it just gave us an option to learn about JSON, because that's a widely used widely adapted web service specification for most of the enterprise application. Usually, one practice we often follow, we try to keep the JQuery stuff at the end of the document, because this is an external file. Or at least if not JQuery, because JQuery, that minified version, is a very small file that could be loaded fast. The file which you are going to create, or a JQuery, or maybe a JavaScript block which you are going to add, maybe slightly bigger depending on your application requirement. So it is always a recommended design to keep the script or custom script block at the end of the document, because we are going to keep the document ready, so we don't need to worry about the placement of it. But keeping the script block at the end, make sure your page is loaded slightly faster, because the number of lines of code, the script, or the one what you are going to write, if it is a number of lines, it won't stop the page loading. At least user would see something loaded, then slightly it will take time to load this JavaScript. So it is a recommended practice, but literally there is no rule in development. In fact, any project which has its own requirement makes the rule. So I probably can say this is the best practice. Otherwise, I cannot force it or enforce it as a rule. So this is what you need to do. You decide what would be the best. Okay, let me start with this particular design. Now we have a script block. The basic thing, I'll have it included. And I also added one if block. Notice, to start with, the local storage is going to be empty. Nothing, no data is going to be there. So it is always recommended to see whether the local storage contains such object. If not, of course, this particular block won't be even executed. That's a better practice. And it will also avoid some sort of errors, null point kind of errors, because the object never exists, or the non-existing object you are trying to parse something, and that will produce some unwanted object, and that if you try to iterate you end up collapsing everything. It is better to verify whether it is null or not. So this I just added. In fact, I updated the source code in the previous example as well. So this is a recommended practice. I'll create a new object, not to get confused with the same one often, otherwise it will become a standard at one point of time. I just made the change the way I access the object. And also here also I have another way of accessing. For example, see, if you notice an object with the dot and give the attribute and retrieve the value, or give the key and retrieve the value. This is one way. If at all, there is one more way also exists. For example, the TBL object I can retrieve in this way also. This is our alternate way. The object, instead of dot, put a square box and put the attribute name. This is also an alternate way. But whatever is suitable for you, whatever you feel comfortable, use it. But this way also an object can be called. An object can be called through a dot denotation, otherwise a square box, and tell the key or attribute name and get the value. So we just got it, but only thing we have to make sure it is editable. Okay, here how to attach the event. I also have multiple ways of attaching them, so anyway I may take a time to use a different one, or maybe in this example itself I can find a different way of attaching an event. Okay, in this case, if you notice, each table cell, this is how the table cells been added. So this is serial number, and this is first name and subject mark is going to come. So this particular cell is going to be editable. I was telling about the requirement, because each cell, even though looks like a same, but the cell, the data which is holding is a different one. So which is always need to have a reference of the index of particular array so that it can be editable. So I should find a way to add a solution to that. One way is adding a on-click event firing and call a JavaScript function using that way. So let me write a function, and one more thing, it is a double quotation. A double quotation, inside a double quotation should be properly skipped. So this underscore will make sure the quotation marks were skipped. Okay, this is very important. If you have a little confusion, make sure you fully write and what part need to be skipped. So if you notice that this is the one I need to skip, so just before that I added the slash and make sure it is skipped throughout. Otherwise, if you have a confusion, I would recommend not to use the double quotation. Instead use this single quotation. Instead of double quotation, you can use a single quotation. That will avoid the skipping stuff. I don't need to worry about it now, because the wrapper is a single quote now, whatever way, of course. But I prefer this double quotation, because at least we will come to know how to skip the values. Okay, so let me write a function which requires an on-click event listener for first name field to be edited. I'm going to write a function. So on, what is this block? It is a create table. I need to come out of this function. On cell click, it's like just a naming convention. So whenever the cell is getting clicked, so I'm just going to call that. So whenever the cell is getting clicked, at least I should get an output in the console. So we'll verify whether it is printing or not. Yes, but the on click I only added for this particular cell alone. I did not add the on click for other cell. So let me add one more data. Now we have a composite data. I need to know which cell and what kind of data it holds in that cell. One easiest way would be giving an ID for each cell so that I can call the ID and get the data from that. But in this case, assigning an ID is a really difficult task because the entire DOM itself is dynamically created. If it is there here, for example, in this case, if it I written a HTML in this way, I could easily give an ID here. But when this is a dynamically creating an ID, I need to make sure the ID is always unique. The ID which is generated, which is always unique, and then it has to be saved somewhere so that the same ID could be used and retrieve the data. So in this case, giving ID may not be an ideal solution. In that such a situation comes, you have a easy way to access the target element. Nothing but defining this. If we say this is being this being a target, it means when you put a context as a this, it is going to refer the target TD because that's where you are clicking. The TD element table cell which you are clicking. So this would denote this particular table cell. Or the equivalent to JQuery this can be denoted in this way. There is a difference between JavaScript this keyword and jQuery specific this keyword. There is a completely different interpretation, even though both refer the same context in the sense the TD, but the way they handle the object slightly different. I'll write both because we have to understand what kind of a target it is giving me. This is skipping jQuery way, writing plain JavaScript, specifying this. So what is actually this denotes? So in this case, I just make it as a name target. This name could be anything because just it's going to be any reference to that, whatever it's going to come. Let me try to print it, what exactly it is. If you see, if I click it, I get the entire target of this TD element. The whole element is printed over here. If I click on a specific, the whole, which element I am pressing, the target itself is being printed. I mean getting a HTML code. But problem is, once I get the HTML code, in that I need to identify what is the text written on it. Because I need to see, I really don't need TD on click and all blah blah. I only need this particular word Shiva. So how I can extract it, it is going to be a little difficult one. Maybe one easiest way, having inner, inside TD, what is the HTML content to say? Probably this would give me a solution. Of course, now I am getting back the word what I am typing. This is JavaScript target or skipping. If I write instead of this, remember dollar signifies it is something to do with the jQuery object. This has to be dollar to make it this is nothing but a normal JavaScript. It is a jQuery specific context. If I put in this way, what is this target is going to output? Let us find. Now I get some object. It means jQuery analyzed the DOM and prepared a JavaScript object, each and every information. Now, okay, TD available. Okay, in that how many attributes are there? What is the content is being written on that? Everything it prepared and made it as a single object. See, if you see the number of data, it just extracted everything and it has given you a complex object. In that, what is the text? Outer text is nothing but what is printed. So a ready-made object is available for us because this is what we want. A programming language, a native object is more than enough to extract. Instead of getting a string, analyze it, pick the required data. If it is a JavaScript object, it will be very easy for us. So jQuery does a lot of work in this case. So I'm going to be pretty interested on few things. Parent node. See, it not only tells about information about this particular node, where this particular node is located, what is the parent of this node, that is also it is telling me. It is saying the parent node for a TD element is TR. So of course table row inside TD is there. So it not only tracks the specific element, it also tracks the previous element. It has the entire history of the particular DOM, so that can be used for various purposes. So I'm going to use, instead of plain this, I'm going to use dollar this, because that's the benefit of using which element getting clicked. So it is going to give me a context as well as the event information of the TD element, and it also gives me to read what is the content typed inside. So let me analyze a little bit. The TD gives me an array. In that, the 0th element, I'm going to look for some keyword text. SPS text content. So the text content is actually what is printed on this cell. So let me bring that out. First, an array, 0th element, text content. Am I right? It's text content, right. Now if I click, I only get the text of the selected field. Now I'm going to replace the text with the input field or input element so that it becomes editable. Okay. We have a target. Let me create a input field so that we can replace type text, skip them, value, I'm not going to keep anything, so let us keep the I just wrote HTML code. Inside value field, whatever the item gets clicked, the text I'm just putting it to a value. So this particular HTML code, I'm just going to either attach it to my target. So the target HTML. Remember, this is a jQuery object, so I can use all val, HTML, append, everything I can use it here. So this one I'm just going to replace a tr with a text to a input text field. Let's see how it comes. Yeah, we got it. So once I click, the text is replaced with the input field. and now it is editable. Of course, I have a little trouble now, but anyway, at least the editing happens. It works, but it works in such a way it is ready for editing purpose. Remember, it doesn't have a focus. If you notice that the cursor is not blinking over there, so we have to make sure it retains a focus. But one more bug is there. If I re-click again, something really bad happens, like it does not have a value. In fact, it doesn't even allow me to edit. But at least somehow we are able to convert a normal text into a input text field. But now we have to see what has to be done, what should not be done. It is actually happening for one reason, because whenever cell click is happening, cell click is nothing but you are pressing the table cell TD. So hitting multiple time, it will try to replace the table cell with the new input text field. That's the reason one is overridden by another, because we are using HTML. So every time a new input field will be added whenever the table cell is clicked. So we have to make sure nothing happens when the very first time text input is added. After that, the cell it just work only as an input field, not as a editable cell. So I'm just going to make the target contain a text content. The text content will be there only when a non-editable text is available. The text content won't be there for input field. So a non-editable cell content is there, mean it will add an input field. Once the input field is added, it will not replace the already added input field. Now if you notice, I can of course focus it. In fact, I can freely edit them. So it doesn't disturb. But still not perfect, because according to our requirement, once a particular input field gets the focus, the other should be removed. But in this case, whatever I click gets the focus. That we have to work on. Even though the very first time when I click it doesn't have a focus, I have to click again to get the focus. So first requirement, the moment I click, there should be a focus. So let me obtain a focus. Okay, it is a string now. Any string can be converted, or any HTML string, or the string looks like a HTML code, can be converted into a JQuery object by simply denoting JQuery. Anything will become a JQuery object. So instead of directly simply writing an input or any HTML, I just make it as a JQuery object. Now it has become a JQuery object. I can use any functions like HTML, val, or whatever. In this one of a function, I'm going to use focus. Get the focus. Now if you see that, once I click, the focus is there. The very first time I click, the focus is obtained. Because it retains a focus, the moment you click the item or click the cell, the cursor is blinking. So I can handle the focus because I converted the plain HTML tags into a jQuery specific tag, and then it becomes a jQuery specific object, so I can use any blur, focus, click, any kind of function I can attach to that. Remember, this is also a plain HTML. It would have been better if I convert that into a jQuery specific. Okay, if required we will go back and convert them, otherwise let's wait. Okay, focus. Now our task is to, whenever the focus is revoked, the cell again go back to a non-editable. That we have to do that. I'm going to add one more function called on blur. On blur, what I just said, when it loses the focus, it will give you a callback. Mean once you type and when you are moving your cursor to somewhere out, on blur event has happened. So a input text field, when a focus is lost, it will give you a callback through on blur. So I just need to have one more function to handle um, the blur event. But this is quite redundant adding this way. Instead, I prefer much efficient way because it is already a JQuery object, so I can use any functions. I could handle in this way. So let me put a console whether it is actually calling or not. See the step-by-step approach. Every step I am verifying whether it is working or not, and that's the appropriate way of developing in the very beginning stage. Once you get experience, of course you can skip all the steps, but for the beginning step, make sure every level of code you write, you test it. If you see that I just clicked on some other place, of course there is no cursor, it has lost the focus, it immediately gave me a callback, something, okay, the input field has lost the focus. So in that case, we have to replace that with the text content. Okay, I do have a little difficulty still, but anyway, let me try. This is the input field, this is the text content, and this is the target. Okay, I have a target here. Whatever the user has typed, the value would be taken, and again the target, the cell would be set to a non-editable one. Notice that when I change the focus to some other element, the previous one losing the edit feature. Whether it is working or not, that's different case. If I refresh, everything will go away because I've been connected with the local storage yet. But at least I am moving the focus between two elements. One becomes editable at a time, the other, anything which loses the focus, becomes non-editable. So that's a pretty simple way of maintaining an editable cell in this example, but still not perfect because if I refresh, everything goes away. I need to do some other way to persist them. One more requirement or one more feature, when blur has a callback function, if it is a event based, blur is a event based, focus is a event based, you can also expect a event callback because it will also give you information about the event. So it's a method overloaded one, mean a same function with a different parameter signature. It accepts the normal or no parameter function. It also accepts the function with the event parameter. So this event I can use it, okay, I can analyze whether which event was triggered. Of course the event is going to be blur only, but if you really have something to do with the event which you want to know what event triggered, you can do that. In fact, that was helpful for me to analyze enter. For example, in this case, when I hit enter, nothing happens. I hit enter, nothing happens. I want to detect whether the enter is pressed. So in that case, I am going to attach one more event, key press. Remember that on, you just need to omit on. and write the rest of the thing. Key pressed, or if you have suspicion over like whether such an event is there or not, what you can do, I have a input text here. Let me see whether on key, yeah, key press. Okay, just on key press. Let me copy. We just need to omit the my typo. What is the key being pressed? Remember, any key, it is going to detect any key, but I need to put a if condition to find whether enter key is pressed. But at least we'll identify whether the key press is detecting or not. If you notice that whatever I type, just, but only I'm interested on the key code. Which key code is called enter? I need to identify. What is that enter? You see the key code is 13. So whenever key code 13 is detected, it is called enter. So let me do that. If what is that key uppercase, C is uppercase, 13, enter pressed, and of course all I need to do, make that particular thing non-editable, mean the user done with that work. So let me do that. I hit enter, just it became non-editable. So it's pretty easy because we get used to press enter every time when we are done with our work. So just I'm detecting. So in this case, this overloaded method having an event parameter helps. So in this case, if you need an event which you want to find which event is triggered, make use of this. Otherwise, leave it. In the for example, in this case, I haven't used the event, but if you want, you can use it. So the callback function, not only it gives the information about certain action is performed, it also gives the instance of the event. If you really want to keep that event, yes, you can keep it. Otherwise, leave it empty. Okay, so somehow we managed to get the most of the part. Time to persist. I mean, the edit should be persisting. If I refresh, everything goes back to normal. I need to update the database or local storage once the edit is done. That let's do how we are going to do that. Okay, I need to know the index of the item which I am clicking. I also need to know whether which field I am clicking, mean name field I am clicking, or subject I am clicking, or mark I am clicking. So additional two parameters needed. One is the index of the particular cell and what type of cell is being pressed. So these two additional fields I need to get from a click event. So let me do one thing here. This is over up to here, plus plus. Index is nothing but this I. An argument, additional argument I am adding. Index. Then what I would be needing, it is for F name. I mean, this field is for first name. Similarly, I'm going to add the same for if name is done. This is for subject. Subject is done. This is for two parameters added. So time to update this method signature, index, maybe key. So additional parameters added. Now I know the index and time to update them. When blur and key press happens, the edit is actually going to work. Table record, get the index of the specific record. Okay, I'll do one thing for simplicity. First I'm retrieving the specific record and I'm changing the value on the specific record and getting the key from this particular, for example, first name. The first name is updated now, the value is assigned, and when data was changed, recreate the table. Recreate table is going to be a refresh one, right? So I really don't see this one is needed. Okay. First thing, everything becomes editable now. So all are editable. Let me change. Something really happens. Oh, I did not update the local storage. That's really bad. I could write in the single line instead of using this multiple way of calling them. Same object, update the key. This is more than enough. Because if you see the warning, it is telling me that the object is unused. Because you are getting one value from this array and you create a different object. If you update that object, it won't take effect to this particular array. So that's why even your NetBeans is giving you a warning saying that unused. So in order to avoid that, I am just retrieving the particular index on supplying the key, retrieve the object from the same array and update it. So this is a appropriate way to update the element, but we are still not done. We have to update the local storage as well. Is that this one? So it is updated to the local storage and then the table will be recreated. Now the change is permanent. If I refresh also, data is going to be there. So we just added the edit option to the table cells by simply using JQuery event handling. Dynamically created cells now has option to be edited. Of course, probably we can extend it a little. Maybe we can introduce one more cell for delete button, because we will keep a separate cell for it. Once the user click on delete, the cell gets removed. Of course, the data is removed and cell also gets removed. That we can work on it. Maybe you can take it as a separate example to have the particular feature added. So this is a simple one, and of course I introduce other way of adding the event instead of adding the event in the same HTML tag itself. And I also introduced a way to convert a plain string based HTML tags into jQuery based object. And I also introduced the context, the keyword this, jQuery based context and a normal JavaScript based context. But throughout this example, I'll be spending more time with the jQuery specific, because jQuery gives me an object representation instead of a kind of a string representation of the DOM element. So here we know a couple of things, but here also this part also could have been made a little better, but of course we have a time, we will improve them. But somehow we made this, the entire cells are editable. So it is slowly getting into a transaction based now. Mean a transaction nothing but giving option to view, update, delete, and of course applying various filters. Somehow we have done it now. So the rest of the example I'll be covering on adding the delete and of course various other CSS based additions. Uh, Hopefully tomorrow you can complete this example.